The scripture that we've chosen for today is Proverbs 31:25. And it says, she is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. And I chose this scripture in preparation for today because I think in you're recognizing some of the struggles that mums have or are facing now, having a new baby, that we need to remind her that she is clothed in strength and dignity, and that she can laugh at the days to come. And I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves of that as well, that we are clothed in strength and dignity. So let's just start today with opening up in prayer. So I'm going to say, dear Lord, we come before you today in our lunchtime conversation, connecting from across South Africa. And I thank you for this opportunity with the technology that we're able to do that, and that we're able to bring the families that we're supporting before you, Lord, and to be able to speak through some of the challenges, some of the highs and lows that they may be experiencing, and how we can lovingly support them. Father, as we open up today, may we remember the scripture that we are clothed in strength and dignity, and that we can laugh at the days to come. That during the challenges we face across our nation and across the world now, that we can remember that we still have your strength and your dignity and your joy and your peace. And so we give you this time now, and I pray that it be a really good, fruitful, and energizing conversation. And I thank you for all the people that have been able to join us, and I pray blessings over them today, Lord, and may you bless them and their families with health and to keep safe during this time. In Jesus' name, amen.
Today we're continuing the conversation around how to care for families during the different stages of the first 1,000 days. So last week we looked at the pregnancy and what's happening in pregnancy, and today we're looking at the window of time from birth to about 3 months, that newborn stage, or what sometimes is called the fourth trimester, the missing trimester. And so that's the window that we're looking at today, and saying, how do we care well for moms, dads, caregivers in this time? How do we care well for families and support them in this really unique time? And in preparation for this, Bryony and I were trying to find ways to get us into the shoes of mom. And so I have a quick video that I'd like us to share, just highlighting some of the things that are happening in this window. So I'm going to play my video for you now, and I'm trusting it will all work well, and then we'll come back.
Most people are aware of the 3 trimesters of pregnancy, but many are not so familiar with the term of the 4th trimester, and that's the first 6 weeks of the postpartum period. So in the 4th trimester, there are many things happening, both with the mom and the baby. For the baby's learning to feed. That's probably the biggest thing happening in the 4th trimester. For the mom is still recovering from either her vaginal delivery or her cesarean section. So she's having to take care of her newborn baby, but she's also taking care of her vagina, her breasts, and all the things that are recovering from her birth.
I think from a physical standpoint, some things that I didn't think about in that 4th trimester is just how tired I was really going to be. Like, it is a huge adjustment from going from no kids to your first child. And I remember thinking, I'm so tired. Am I going to be able to keep my eyes open?
After delivery, there is a rapid depletion of mom's hormone levels, even for up to 40% really in the first couple of days after delivery. And that can really send a mom into an emotional tailspin.
New moms go through many new emotions. We think of joy, but sometimes we forget that new moms feel overwhelmed, afraid, and very tired. So those emotions are very prevalent in the newborn period because it's a huge undertaking to have a newborn at home. So many women, as many as 3 out of 4 women, will get what we call the baby blues, which is feeling down at times, crying at times, and feeling a little overwhelmed. That usually resolves in the first few weeks postpartum.
When it starts to last much beyond there, especially if a mom does not want to be engaged with her family, engaged with her baby, and, engaged in daily activities, that's when we start to get concerned for more severe mood disorders. Postpartum anxiety and depression tends to kind of run hand in hand. It's not often clearly one or the other. It can be, but it isn't often. It's often a mix of the two. And in the event that that happens, then certainly the number one thing we want a patient to do is to reach out to somebody so that we can help.
I think that a lot of women probably suffer with postpartum depression because they're afraid to say something, and they're afraid that society is going to judge them because they're supposed to be like this strong woman, or, maybe you feel like, oh, I'm a strong woman. I got this. I can do this. Hormones are not something that you can control. If you feel like there is something wrong, or that, something isn't quite right, make sure you, speak up and, talk to your doctor about it.
So that little video gives us a quick insight into this window. It does go into postnatal depression, and we will be talking about that in a couple of weeks to come and go into more detail around that. But we see in this how much is happening in this short window of time from birth, from the moment baby arrives, or even in hospital, going through the whole birthing experience can be quite a moment. I was connecting with some friends the other day, and each of us were reminiscing over our birth experience, even though mine was like 12 years ago, my first one, and I can still remember it clearly. It's still vivid in my mind. It was a marker in my life. But in this window of time, we talk about the missing fourth trimester, and this idea that babies are born too early, maybe even 3 months too early, because they aren't even able to smile, coo, or turn over. And compared to other mammals, they actually need a lot of care in that first period of time. And so there's a lot of attention needed. In that first few weeks, baby is needing to feel that same soothing sensation and warmth and nurturing that he or she received in the womb, and is craving that physical touch and care from mom. And so often moms feel like they can't put baby down, that baby will only sleep on their chest, that sense of like closeness, hearing mom's heartbeat, smelling mom, and feeling really close is so important in this time. So it's a really all hands on deck time where mom can feel overwhelmed at this constant need to care. In this time, whether it's your first baby, second baby, or third baby, it's an incredible time, as each child is a new experience, and it's a significant time. And I know when I was chatting to Julie the other day about this, she was saying that with each birth, a mother is born. And I love that. Like, it's remembering that with the birth, not just a child is born, but a mother is born, and each birth is different. And that there's so many firsts happening at this time. There's firsts for the baby, but there's also firsts for mom. There's the first for around trying to feed and how to work that out, and mom's learning to feed baby, and baby's learning to feed. Breastfeeding could be going smoothly, or it could be really challenging and a steep learning curve for both mom and baby. There's a whole lot of recovering happening physically for mom. She's learning to care for herself and care for baby, and often moms report on being like really, really tired. The lack of sleep can be a shock to the system, and having to cope with the emotions and the hormones and all of those things going on. So it's a massive period of adjustment. And if I think back to my time, I feel like it's the steepest learning curve in my life, that I learned so much in such a short window of time, as trying to get to know my child, trying to work out. I didn't even know how to put a nappy on my baby. I had to have a nurse in the hospital explain it. I was clueless, right? And so there's so much to learn. And so today I'm very excited to have Julie with us. I know Julie's passion is around how do we care for moms and how do we support moms. Julie is part of Embrace, which is a movement around caring for moms and motherhood. And I'm going to let Julie introduce herself and explain a little bit about Embrace and what you do. And then we're going to chat a bit with Julie around how do we support and care well for moms. So Julie, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, thank you for joining us today. So good.
Hi everyone. Oh, thanks so much for having me. What a great way to spend lunchtime on what day are we? Wednesday. Yeah, you are more engaging company than my dog and the children, I'm sure. So thanks for the introduction. Yeah, my name is Julie. I work for a social justice movement called Embrace. We're a national movement with a pretty bold vision, which is that we want South Africa to grow into, or to become the best place to grow into motherhood, where the power of mothers is realized in terms of social, economic, and political life. And I think in the Christian context, one could say in relation to spiritual life too. So Yeah, and so we have 4 sort of mission points, which I just kind of define how we work. So we primarily advocate for the priorities of early motherhood. So pregnancy, sort of this 4th trimester phase being a big one, and those early years where you're adjusting to growing into that motherhood journey. We elevate the voices and experiences of mothers because we believe that doing that builds community. And it makes stakeholders, so that's government officials, ward councillors, whoever it may be, aware of the lived realities of early motherhood in South Africa. And that's really important because sometimes it's a time in a person's life when they're often very much homebound. And so how do we make people aware of how difficult it is to breastfeed? It doesn't always come, it's natural, but it doesn't always come naturally. Or childbirth, the challenges that happen in that space, it was all very hush hush and quiet and private. And then we identify and capacitate leaders and advocates for mothers to effect meaningful change in their communities. We run a fellowship program called Mamandla, where we look for women who are passionate about advocating and leading in motherhood spaces around the country. So we've just recruited our cohort for this year, but if that's something you're interested in, keep following along because we'll be recruiting again towards the end of the year. And it's a great, great experience. And then our 4th mission point is that we seek out opportunities for network building. And I suppose that's sort of what we're doing here today, to maximize the impact for the lives of mothers. So we love networking with organizations, other social movements, faith-based communities, because often, first of all, we can learn from each other. You don't have to recreate the wheel. People are doing things. Sometimes it's about harnessing that collective power, building, bringing many voices together and sort of shouting a little bit louder. And so we love doing that. That's probably my favorite way to work is with other people. And so that's us in a nutshell. We work around the country. Really, we do have quite a bold, as I said, national agenda for motherhood. And I am very privileged to have been with Embrace for 6 years now, capacitating it from, leading it from the front. So yeah, that is me in a nutshell. I'm a mom of it. Yeah, that's an important part. I'm a mom of 2 little boys. The eldest joined our family through adoption. So that was a very different journey into motherhood. And our youngest child is our biological child who also was quite a jolt into motherhood. He came a bit early. And my boys are only 18 months apart. So it was... that 4th trimester felt like it didn't really end. I think that fog, my youngest is 5, and so that fog is sort of just feeling like it's starting to lift now, if I'm very honest.
Awesome. Thanks, Julie. And Julie and I have been working in the space together since 2014. I think cut my teeth learning from Julie and being in many meetings around how do we do this.
And me, Julie, vice versa, learning from you.
I know you guys have done a lot of listening and a lot of, sitting around listening to moms in various spaces. You've documented mom stories, especially in the birthing space. Put us in the shoes of moms today. What are they experiencing? What are some of the struggles specifically in this early window, newborn, birthing? What are things we need to be aware of as we journey with moms that will build a deeper empathy for us as we try and care and support for moms?
Sure. So you mentioned the quote about, or you mentioned that I'd mentioned to you in our chat around, birth, not just being a birth of a baby, but also a birth of a mother. And there's this wonderful quote by a writer who speaks a lot about motherhood. Her name's Bunmi Ladatan. If you don't know her, you should look her up. She's very funny. And she has this beautiful quote that I use often, and it basically says, birth produces 2 people. The first, a flailing soul struggling to take in a new world, a new way of being. The second, a baby. And I for me, that is just, it's a profound reminder that the birth, that the entry into motherhood is a time of incredible vulnerability, and where really you are flailing in a new world, where suddenly you have an additional responsibility. You've got your body having gone through this very real change. And even if you have not given birth biologically, even just the role of motherhood, I mean, I very much experienced it the first time with my eldest son too. Suddenly I was, had the responsibility of this child, and I really went through a sort of a postpartum experience with him too. And so I always like to say that, because I think when we think of birth, the focus for society and for most people, the excitement comes around, this new baby that's joining our family. And I don't think that's never ill-intentioned. It's just the way, it's a new life, and it is very exciting, whether it's a grandchild or a niece or a new nephew or a new neighbor or community member. It is very important, but sometimes that all that excitement can often overshadow the experience that the mum is going through. And so I think it's really just important to be quite intentional about thinking about the mum. And so I've made it a practice, always asking, whenever my friends have babies or my sisters or anyone in our family, to kind of be quite deliberate, where they don't jump to see the baby. When you go and visit, look at the mum first, ask mum how she's doing. So birth, we to kind of get back to the question that you asked around the kinds of experiences, we have a real privilege of meeting with mums all the time. And birth can be, as much as it's a wonderful thing, it can be very traumatic. So first of all, when we think about birth, is I think only 6% of babies come on their due date. So for the 94% of other babies, they don't come when they're expected. And so not only is the process physical and can be very, it can be traumatic. It's beautiful, but can be traumatic. But when that happens, can be quite a jolt to someone. Whether your baby comes very, very early, which of course brings that kind of 4th trimester, which really should be the 3rd trimester, that is a very, very traumatic thing. And if you're interested in reading more about what premature mums go through, you can go to our website. We've got a whole story portal about over 20 stories of mums who've given the experiences of giving birth prematurely at government hospitals, at private hospitals, very different experiences. And then, again, not everyone has access to the same support network that you might have. And so for some women who are birthing, say, at their due date, it is an experience. So say they might go into labor, depending on where they're giving birth, many women are simply dropped off at the hospital. Some women, actually, the process of getting to the hospital is traumatic, either waiting hours on end for an ambulance service, or trying to figure out which neighbor can drive you to the hospital. So just the anxiety on getting to the hospital. And then when they're there, not everyone has a partner. Not every health facility allows a partner in, which is not really what it's supposed to be. But I've traveled to many of these facilities where I took a photo, and at a quite a prominent hospital in Joburg, where the sign was outside the labor and delivery door that said no escorts beyond this point. So that means that at a moment when your life is about to change forever, you are on your own. You remember, many women, specifically giving birth in the public health care sector, don't have a particular doctor or midwife that they're going to be seeing. It's whomever is on duty at that time. So you're basically at your most vulnerable with a stranger. And of course, I have also the privilege of working with many healthcare professionals, and I know so many of them try their very best. But the reality is that it's an overwhelming experience with high volumes of women in labor. Women will give birth on their own. In the case where it is a normal vaginal delivery, hopefully with no complications, that's still obviously a exhausting, extremely can be extremely painful process. There's no such thing as epidurals in the public health sector unless you are going for a cesarean section. And then if nothing has gone wrong and you've had a pretty straightforward delivery, you'll be discharged sort of 8 hours within the 8 hours later. So that means that, your very raw body, your milk might sort of just be coming in, now has to make its way home. But now you also saddled with this tiny new baby. And my experience of having talked to mums who've had multiple babies before is that, you may be, like Ruth said, she didn't know how to change a nappy with baby number 1. You may know the basics like baby number 2, but people who've had really easy breastfeeding journeys around baby 1 and 2 might struggle with baby 3. The physical recovery is different every time. So it really, that quote by Bonami Ladatan stands up. No matter how experienced you are, it is always a transformative experience. we've also spoken to women for whom it's been an incredibly empowering experience. And I think that's part of one of my personal passion points, is that there actually are things that we can do to come around people in the pregnancy stage and around the birth experience to make that empowering. But I know that my conversation point is sitting at the post-birth, so I will skip past that now, but would be very happy to come back and chat about how one could come alongside friends in what we call a lay doula capacity, which is not maybe someone with a formal qualification, but could come along someone who is going to be giving birth. And we've seen that happen quite a bit in COVID times when hospitals have been restricted. And then just to add that layer to the experience, we also did a whole series last year. You can go onto our Instagram page and have a look, called Moms on Lockdown, where we spoke to mothers. We did, there's an Instagram live video. You can also catch it on Facebook in our video profile. We spoke to women who were pregnant during lockdown. And so many of the women that you're going to be helping, or the families that you're going to be helping or wanting to assist, have been pregnant during a global pandemic, and I never had that experience. And I think that is a unique experience, because so yes, now you've gone through this big physical trauma or this hectic experience. Normally, if you are at a hospital where perhaps you do stay for a night or 2 or 3 nights, you have visitors. You have someone coming to bring you flowers and to get excited. And you're like, oh my goodness, I'm so shattered, but yay, someone's going to come and bring me a present, or, come and see how I'm doing. That can't happen. For many women, they weren't even allowed their partners. I had a few friends who gave birth last year, and their partners were allowed for the delivery, which was a real privilege, but then they were only allowed to see them again when they picked them up 3 days later. So if you can imagine, that's not what, okay, Lauren's putting her hand up saying that was her, okay, that's not the experience I imagine that you ever thought you'd be having. It's not something that anyone could have planned for. And I think we have to be really kind and compassionate to mums, and really go about acknowledging that. And so, that was not something you could have foreseen. Another mum I spoke to, she tried for 6 years of fertility struggles, only to give birth in July last year, with the end of her pregnancy being completely different. She was expecting this long-awaited baby, to have family and friends rally around her and visits in her home, and she had none of that. In fact, she couldn't even have a baby shower, because it was during the peak of the pandemic. And so I just think that we need to give space for mums and to acknowledge, and I'll speak a bit about the different ways you can come around supporting women through WhatsApp groups and all the different kinds of things you can do, how to step in. But I think it really needs to start with acknowledgement. So maybe to go back and to think about everyone who's given birth in the last year, even if their baby is now on the brink of walking 8-9 months, go back to them and say, I had this chat today, and I've been thinking, like, wow, you gave birth at a time that was unique in history. How was that for you? Oh, is that the lockdown baby there, Lauren? Oh, there we go. Like, how was that experience for you? And like, I can't imagine what you went through. Like, if you're open to talking about it, I'd love to hear about it. So just like, I think just acknowledgement. I know that when we've had that happening in the circles that we work, that's been really well received. Because I know Sikunye Network works with families, I would really recommend to also say to the dads in the picture, who are like dads, partners who are like, what was that like for you? That's also, it must have been a hectic experience not to be able to pop in and out of the hospital freely, to have to drop your partner off. Like, it's a big deal. And I think just like an acknowledgement goes a long way. So I don't know if that sort of answered the question about the sorts of experience, but just to say exactly like the video kind of gave an overview for general, is that it is a physical and an emotional journey. It is day 3 postpartum or after birth is very well documented as the day when we call it like day 3, I call it the day of the weeps. I remember clearly 5 o'clock in the morning, in bed with my tiny prem baby, and crying crying, and I was experienced with babies, crying my eyes out and not knowing why. And day 3 is just a day of a particular hormonal peak that can throw women. So yes, your physical recovery may be good, and you might see women walking around. I mean, I still think that's miraculous, but then you've got this massive emotional surge, and your milk is coming in normally around day 3 as well. Quite, the colostrum shifts over to active milk flow, and it's just hectic. So there's the seen changes, and then there's the unseen changes. And remember, obviously we tend to see people with their clothes on, I hope, and so you won't have a sense of what's physically going on. But if you have given birth, whether it is a vaginal delivery or cesarean delivery, it doesn't actually matter. It's a mess, and it's real, and it's not something, because of course we still have a lot of stigma around that kind of conversation around bodies, that people might not be as aware of what is going on. So just take all that into consideration in terms of when you run over to see a new baby, that, give the mom that attention.
Thanks, Julie, for sharing that. I think that whole idea that every birthing experience is unique, even for a mom who's had several or multiple births, it can be a unique experience, and acknowledging the season and the time when she's having it, and specifically in this COVID pandemic. I know when we chatted, you were talking about some helpful ways to support and care for moms from your experience. If you can quickly jump through some of the ways that we can frame the question, or how to support moms well. And then I want to open up the floor to the group and see if there's any comments or any questions that they may have for you around this topic.
Sure. So I think there are very many ways that you can support a new family, a family that's bringing home a new baby. Obviously with COVID, there are some restrictions. You might have come and done, maybe you visited your friends in their homes before, that was part of your experience. And now understanding that even with the numbers coming down, that mother, that father, they've been incubating that baby during a time of increased anxiety. And so they might be feeling quite protective over their newborn baby. I think that's right. And I think you need to respect that. So that means we have to be a bit more creative about the kinds of checking in, because of course, we don't want to increase that mother's sense of loss. I didn't have a baby shower. I didn't have all these people like oohing and ahhing over me. And now I also don't get to have all my friends over for tea. So just be mindful of that. And I think that means we have to be really creative with how we can support. I think one of the biggest things that has been said to me a lot when I've been a part of these kinds of conversations is I ask my friend how, to please let me know if she needs some help, and she never asks. And I think that speaks to, a lot of things. The reality is motherhood comes with the assumption that mothers know and must know how to do it all. And the feeling, whether it is real or perceived, is that I'm failing if I can't juggle my home and my other children and my new baby and my body and my partner. And so if you just ask an open-ended question, please let me know if you need a hand, I think there are very few mothers who will take you up on that. Those who do are amazing. That's wonderful. But I think there are very few who feel confident. So I always say that it's really helpful to think about how you ask the question. Now, again, it really depends on the kind of relationship you have with someone, in terms of how I don't want to say forceful, that's not the right word, but how strong you come in terms of your offer to help. But let's take, for example, that this is a friend or someone at your church that you know fairly well. You could, and say, for example, that what you would like to do is bring them a meal one night. So I think instead of saying, if you'd like a meal, please let me know, change that to something like, I'm going to be cooking you a meal this week. What night suits you best? Or I'd like to cook you a meal. I've planned to bring you a meal this week. Do you have any dietary requirements? So shifting the pressure. Then if Ruth had to say that to me, Julie, I bought ingredients to cook a meal this week. Which night suits you best? I go, okay, well, she's already thought through this. She's got the meal ingredients. She's going to do it Tuesday. Tuesday suits me best. It's the guilt and the pressure of now goes from me and I'm taking it that Ruth has offered that because it's planned. I don't have to feel the pressure. So simple shifts like that, which is, I'd like to help you with your other children this week. Which day suits you best? Or would it be better if I babysat your daughter in the morning or the afternoon so that you can rest? And again, these sort of framings of questions, it really does depend on the relationship. For example, if someone I didn't know very well was suddenly at my home offering to do my laundry, I probably would be quite panicked. But if a good friend was like, I'm here, which of the two, I'm going to do your laundry or I'm going to do your dishes, do you have a preference? Or what, like, I'd be like, oh, please do the dishes, they're staring at me, so there is a relational currency, and you do have to feel that out. But I do think maybe just think through the framing of the questions. And then I think the other thing to do is in the space, so obviously things like meals, dropping off baby items, offering to care for other children, if you could do that safely, especially if you've got other children, I think that's huge, because ultimately you wanted to allow those two new humans, the baby and the flailing mother, to have that time to bond and to rest. And really, we can never, like, rest and bonding, if you're thinking about all the things that mother needs to establish, she needs to bond with her baby, and she needs to establish a good feeding routine. And that takes time. It takes a peace of mind. It takes the ability to practice. It takes often the ability to not have your top on. So you can't really have people running in and out of your house. So for me, I remember it being really helpful when my family took my eldest, who was 18 months at the time, and they allowed me to then have that bonding experience with my new baby. So that's huge. But if you can't do that, there are also free ways to help. And I think checking in on a mother's emotional state, how she's doing, reminding that mum that she is seen, even if she's not physically seen because of the pandemic, she's still seen. So you've got to be intentional about that. And I think there are very few people who get this right all the time. And for those, if you do this, I'd love to know how you do this. But for me, one of the things I do is WhatsApp, simple WhatsApp. And you actually, if you have a diary or a calendar or whatever it is to actually put those mums in your calendar as a to-do list, WhatsApp Ruth 8 a.m. 8 a.m. comes, and I would put that on like a reminder, set that for 3, 4, 5 weeks time. Every Monday, Ruth will get a message. Ruth, I'm thinking of you. How was your weekend? How are you feeling? How's it going with baby? As simple as that. If you're trying to create a community of a bunch of mums, a WhatsApp group would be a great thing to do. If you're perhaps trying to create a system of support in your church, is to bring mums of a similar stage together. Because if, for example, I have just had my baby this week and Bryony had her baby a month ago, we can, if you can create a space where we can chat about that, I can learn from Bryony's breastfeeding tips, and Ruth is 3 months down the line, so we can start creating these sort of a postpartum huddle. And if you've got the capacity to facilitate something like that, you often need a facilitator in these groups, not to over-engineer it, but to, pick a picture to throw out every week and to be a bit intentional about creating that space. That's great. If airtime is an issue for you and data is an issue for you, as it is for many, many people, there is a free app called Moya Messenger. It's M-O-Y-A. I will send a link to Ruth so that you can share it. To download it takes up the tiniest, really the tiniest amount of data. And the app has been designed to be completely data-free. I know it sounds too good to be true. They do a whole bunch of advertising things in their other platform, but I've spoken to the tech designer myself, and the chat function, which works very similarly to WhatsApp, it's just that you can't send pictures and videos and that kind of thing, but the chat function is 100% data-free, and I tried it with the data switched off on my phone. So that is a great thing to do. Start creating little Moya mess, and you can create chat groups. So you can invite everyone here into a Moya group, and we could be chatting for free. So it doesn't have to cost you anything. Obviously, you do have to have a sort of a basic smartphone for that, I do know. But I think it's about routine and getting into the practice of checking into people. And you need to figure out what that looks like for you. But being intentional, is a really great way to show a mom consistently, I'm checking in on you, because no 2 weeks are the same. We know babies grow so much in those first 3 months, and they go through growth leaps and milestones. Their feeding patterns change, their sleep patterns change. So you really need to be checking in on that new family regularly.
Cool.
Does that help a bit?
Perfect. Thank you, Julie. So many good tips, and I'm keen to try and download Moya Messenger and see what it's like. So I'd love to hear from the floor. I know time is running quickly and this lunchtime always goes so fast, but any thoughts that are sparking, any questions, any other thoughts that you want to add to what Julie has mentioned about how we can care well for families? I'd love to hear from others in the room today. You're welcome to unmute yourself and jump into the conversation. Who would like to share something? Anybody got a question they want to add, or some other ideas of how we can do this well? Likelele.
Yes, I think the issue of Moya is I think is gonna work. I was thinking of because we've got number of women with children, to say, to talk about the teething. You need to know when the baby's teething, they will have the nausea. Others, they will have the running time, something like that, maybe to communicate about teething, and then sending the message to them. And then saying, if you have some question, you can ask. I'm ready. I'm prepared to answer you. I think it is going to work for me that way.
Perfect. And I know, for example, Sikunye and a number of other early years websites are available on Moya Messenger, and they're data free. So any of the resources around, I know Messages for Mothers would be there. If they've got questions, they can find them on the Moya messaging. So it's a great platform to share that information too, that you can directly on Moya messaging.
And links into those sites are free.
Yes.
So you can, so the Moya Messenger app can actually be really useful. It's just about finding mums, it's like when no one knew about WhatsApp, it took a while for people to get used to it. And I think it's because it seems too good to be true that people are like, huh? But you just need to get, 3 friends, 3 people in your network to commit to get it going. And it's a great way, those late night chats. I've been a part of a mum support group before where we convened the chat quite deliberately between like 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. And we were on sort of like shift to be available to chat them, because that's often when new mums are awake. They're up with their baby. The babies are restless at that time. And that's when you get the cries for help. They're like, I can't latch this baby. I'm struggling. What can I do? Thinking about the times that mums that would like to chat is really helpful as well.
The 3 o'clock in the morning feed when you can't open your eyes.
Absolutely.
Anybody else got any thoughts before we wrap up today's conversation around how we can care well for families? One more, Likelele.
I've got the question.
Yes.
It's a question. I want to know that the Moya is the app. They need to download a Moya, or we just need, I want to know about the Moya.
So as far as I understand, you've got to download it. It's an app that you need to download, but it's not very big to download.
No, it takes up minimal data. So there is the initial, you do have to download it, but it's very light on data. Once you've got it, the chat function runs. Yeah.
Cool. Hazel, I can see you beautifully on my screen there. Any thoughts from your side and your experience of caring for moms in this space?
Hi, Ruth. No, I'm actually just thinking with the Flourish postnatal classes that we are running and the environment that we are creating for mummies that is having their newborns. And I think it was last night that I had the virtual class, and the one mum said it's now 2 weeks and the umbilical cord didn't fall off yet. And just to do a referral for her, like to say, okay, this is what I can share with you about the umbilical cord. But I could sense that she was really worried, and just the space for her to like voice it, because I think it's very difficult, like in your family now, you are the mom and you have to know all of these things. And just to have the freedom to say, but I really don't know if something is wrong or whatever. Yeah, and then there's just a cultural thing also amongst some of the women that we are having the postnatal classes with, and this is with the medicine that some of the mummies is using. I think is the I'm not even sure how to spell all of those names, but they buy the small bottles and they mix everything with, and those things are having a lot of alcohol in, and having the postnatal classes, and just to share with them that you don't need all of these medications, and your breast milk, it's all you need for the first 6 months. And then you could actually see moms are staring at you with big eyes to say, is it really like that? And yeah, just for them to come into a space where they can get the confirmation and to ask their questions. So yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation today.
I think it's so important to help moms come together in a group where they can share and feel safe to ask questions, and we can normalize stuff and say and refer them for help where they'll have questions, and say, where can we get good information from? Where do you need to see your healthcare provider? Are you struggling with breastfeeding? Are you struggling with these things? So I love what you're saying there, Hazel. I'm glad that you were able to support in that way. Judy?
Just to say, I think one of the great opportunities, if you can say, it's hard to believe in COVID, just thinking about Flourish is, which I absolutely love, is that now, because you're obviously going virtual again, with Flourish classes, it doesn't have to be area specific. So if you know, just a reminder, I mean, obviously there's Flourish hosts in this community, but that's, if you've got a mum wherever in the world, but let's just say wherever in South Africa, she can join in for a Flourish group. And so it's great to look at those pros and say we can actually, virtual communities do have, yes, it's not as great as being able to sit in a circle and have coffee, but they are wonderful for mums who can't get out. There's no transport costs. If you use something like Moya, it's data free, or if you use the Flourish software, it's data free to the mum. And also it allows space for those late night conversations. And if you're hosting that kind of group, you don't have to be online all the time. You just need to get the initial conversations going. Whoever's awake at 3 a.m. will answer the conversation, the call at 3 a.m. But you've at least created that space for that mom to be honest. And I think if we can do more of that, if we can create spaces where any mom anywhere can plug in, I think it's a really powerful thing.
And when she can, I know sometimes moms feel overwhelmed and the day disappears and she feels guilty that she didn't reply to a message. It's also taking the pressure off. When you've got a chance, you can reply. We know your hands are full, so taking the pressure off.
Absolutely.
Bryony, can I hand over to you? Bryony's going to share with us some resources, just FYI, what we can share with moms, and wrap us up for the day. Thanks, Bryony.
Sure. Great. Thanks, Julie, for that really interesting conversation and for the comments. I think this time of the 4th trimester is really interesting, and as you said, the time that's key to supporting mum. And so as we heard, there's the initial first 2 weeks from birth, which are the most critical time, where mum, if she has postnatal depression or struggling to breastfeed, it's time that it can be picked up, and with proper support, mum can overcome them. And so that's why it's really key for those who are supporting mums to check in regularly with mum within those first 2 weeks to see if she's struggling. And especially if she's a mum, I think, as we've heard today, is that she may not feel like she can ask for help, or feels like it's normal what she's experiencing, or I think Hazel, you said how it feels like she's meant to know what she's supposed to do during this. And so just like as Julie said, maybe it's the way we ask the questions that's important, or just offering the help and saying to mum, I'm going to do this, what day suits you? So just looking at how we do ask mum how we can support her. It's also, as we're told, to set reminders to check in with mum. I think often we forget, or days pass by, and then it does help us to remember. But also, I think what was key that came out of the conversation just now was the consistency. I think that's really key for mum, is consistency. So So that's the first 2 weeks are really important to help support mum with any struggles that she might have and get support for her, and referring to her to other services if she does, or maybe showing signs of postnatal depression or struggling to breastfeed. But the 4th trimester is from 0 to 3 months. And so there's just things to remind mum. I'm just going to do like a bit of a wrap-up summary of things to remind mum, such as attend her postnatal checkups. That's key, especially if mum's scared during COVID-19, and just to keep encouraging mum to go for her checkups, and always to speak to a doctor or nurse if she is struggling with things like breastfeeding or soothing baby, or if she's uncertain about what to do is the right thing, like Hazel mentioned, the medication and potions and stuff like that. Just if there's anything like that that she's unsure about, to always encourage her to speak to her doctor or nurse. And again, to also encourage mum to look at who is her circle of support. So we're not expecting you to be the support to mum or the only support that is being provided to mum, but to continue asking mum, like, who in her family, friends, or in the community can provide support to her, and encourage her to reach out to them and actually state what her expectations are or what she's needing from them. I know that can be hard, as we heard from Judy, to actually have mum express what she's needing and feeling like she's then putting the should we say burden on somebody else. But just keep encouraging mum to be able to look to her family and friends, to who she can ask for support. But where you are able to, do offer support, as we heard, such as setting up a WhatsApp group, or a community of mums to learn from one another, or the Moya Messenger. Yeah, and if, as we also heard, thinking around the times that you connect with mum and the times that you can support mum. But sometimes even something as simple as we heard of a meal, or even being the person to offer walking home with mum from the hospital, or the lift, offering a lift home from the hospital, if you're able to do that. But also, I think what has stuck out for me as well is that remembering that dad is part of this birthing experience as well, and he also needs support. And I think especially now during COVID-19, where they're not able to support mums during the birthing procedure. And so I was supporting a family last week where the dad was so worried because every time he picked up the phone, he heard his wife crying in pain and he didn't know what to do. And to actually recognize that dads are going through this as well, that they don't know how to support their wives or partners or mothers of their children when they're in hospital and they're not allowed to go in. So I think it's just, yeah, being able to keep encouraging them, and some of the ideas could be encouraging them to get mum to send photos to him as baby's born, or maybe video chats with her if she's able to, or to encourage skin to skin and bonding with baby once baby's back home, so that he can also bond with baby, having maybe potentially, as we heard, not to have met his child for the first 3 days of its life. So yeah, there's just a few things to think through. And again, just to say to mum and encourage her that if she is struggling with exclusively breastfeeding, to always ask for help, and to have, I know some of the Flourish ladies will know all the sort of do's and don'ts of to breastfeed exclusively, which means no mixtures, no waters, no food. But if you're not sure of this information, don't give information that you're not sure of, to encourage mum to speak to the doctor for health advice. Okay, so with that, we have developed a few resources to help you, and I'm just going to encourage you to go onto our website under the lockdown toolkit. I don't have time to show it to you now, but there's a list of affirming phrases which may help you be able to send affirming messages to mum and dad during this time. There's also scriptures to send, and there may also be some practical resources that you can send to mum as well, some videos or some tips. So go have a look on our website for how to support mum during the fourth trimester. Okay, Ruth, back to you.
Cool, thank you. I know it's 2 o'clock and it's time to run off to our other things that we need to do. I want to say a hearty thank you to Julie for giving up an hour to be with us. It's so nice to have you with us. Thank you for sharing your pearls of wisdom and your experience with us. It's so good to have you with us. And thank you to everybody else for joining today. It's good to see your faces again and see your names on the screen. It fills my heart with joy to see you all. Can I close us in prayer? And we look forward to seeing you next time. Dear Lord Jesus, thank you for this time. Thank you for the conversation that we've been had. I thank you for each person here that represents families that they are caring for and supporting. And I pray that you'd help us to move towards moms and dads in this fourth trimester with compassion and empathy, that we'd be able to really care for them in a really gentle and supportive way. And so I pray that you give us wisdom and discernment as we do that, as we recognize the uniqueness of this stage for each mom and each dad at this time. We pray that you'd help us to be the wind in their sails and strengthen them at this time. Thank you for this time, and we pray that you go with each and every one of us. In Jesus' name, amen.